The Ghost in the City. Chapter 1, The Summer of Fire. Welcome to Synapse Daily. 1968 was a year of pure blood. Thick smoke filled the American sky. Great cities were burning across the nation. Martin Luther King Jr. was gone. The dreamer died on a concrete balcony. Grief turned into instant, violent rage. The streets screamed for immediate justice. People felt a deep, hollow betrayal. The government felt the floor shaking. They feared a total systemic collapse. Washington, D.C. looked like a war zone. Federal troops guarded the White House. Could they stop the next explosion? The president needed a new solution. Standard policing was failing every day. The old tactics were completely useless. Tear gas could not stop the anger. Bullets only made the fire grow. They turned to a secret weapon. It was not a tank or jet. It was a primitive, massive computer. They wanted to predict the human soul. They wanted to calculate the next riot. Scientists gathered in cold, dark rooms. They stared at complex mathematical grids. Can math stop a burning building? Can an equation replace a riot shield? The elite felt a strange, digital hope. They ignored the cries for human rights. They chose the logic of the machine. 1968 became a massive social laboratory. The citizens were the test subjects. The variables were poverty and pain. The result was a digital nightmare. Fear was the primary data input. Control was the only desired output. Welcome to the age of prediction. The machine was finally waking up. It started breathing the city's smoke. The simulation of life began now. It was a dark, binary dawn. Chapter 2, The Birth of Seed. DARPA took the lead in 1968. They funded a project called SEED. It stands for Simulation of Evolutionary Events. The name sounded like a new beginning. But its goal was cold and mathematical. They mapped the physics of human desperation. Computers were still the size of rooms. Huge machines hummed in secret basements. Magnetic tapes spun with rhythmic clicks. Punch cards held the secrets of crowds. Each card represented a broken home. The Pentagon wanted a digital crystal ball. They sought patterns in the urban chaos. Data points replaced real human faces. Individual suffering was just a number. Anxiety was now just a numerical variable. The machine began to hum with fear. Brilliant minds worked for the military. They treated sociology like fluid dynamics. A crowd was just moving liquid. Pressure built up in the slums. The computer tracked the rising heat. It recorded every protest and march. The SEED program was very ambitious. It tried to model human evolution itself. But this was evolution under pressure. This was survival in a concrete cage. The designers were elite white men. They did not understand the streets. They only understood their complex logic. They built a world of steel. They ignored the heart's heavy rhythm. The machine grew on massive grants. Tax dollars funded this digital eye. It watched the poor from afar. It categorized every type of rebel. The birth of SEED was quiet. The implications were loud and terrifying. The future was being programmed here. The simulation was hungry for more. It needed more facts and figures. The hunger for data never stopped. Chapter 3, The Urban Simulation. How do you simulate a city? You divide it into tiny digital cells. Each cell represents a city block. The model tracked thousands of variables. It looked at the local rent prices. It counted the broken street lights. Employment rates became high-pressure zones. Housing quality became the fuel source. Police presence acted as the spark. The computer visualized the city's nerves. It looked for the breaking point. Where would the glass shatter first? The model mapped the contagion of anger. Violence was treated like a forest fire. Wind direction was the local rumor. Drywood was the lack of jobs. The simulation ran through the night. It predicted heat waves in fury. Is the corner store a target? Is the subway station a trap? The machine answered with cold binary. It calculated the probability of looting. It estimated the number of bricks thrown. The urban simulation was a mirror. But the mirror was cracked and gray. It saw a city of objects. It did not see a community. The streets were lines on a screen. The parks were empty green pixels. Humans were dots moving in patterns. The simulation stripped away all dignity. It turned neighborhoods into tactical grids. The military loved the clear maps. They could see the invisible threats. They could plan the perfect blockade. The city was a board game. The citizens were the static pieces. The computer was the ultimate player. It played with lives and deaths. The simulation was almost ready now. The virtual city was fully alive. The real city was still burning. Chapter 4: The Ghost in the Machine. The scientists used historical riot data. They fed the machine the Watts riots. They analyzed the 1967 Newark uprising. Every brick thrown was recorded. The computer looked for tipping points. It analyzed the speed of a rumor. How fast does a lie travel? How quick does a crowd gather? It found that rumors traveled like viruses. Information flow determined the riot size. If the news traveled fast, fire followed. The machine didn't care about justice. It only cared about the kinetic energy. The ghosts of past riots became code. The past was teaching the future. Digital ghosts haunted the new hardware. Memory was transformed into a weapon. The machine learned from every mistake. It memorized the path of every bullet. It knew which buildings burned best. The researchers called it the ghost. It was a hidden, predictive spirit. It whispered through the spinning tapes. They will attack the precinct next. They will gather at the bridge. The ghost was never wrong about fear. Fear is a very consistent data set. Human panic follows a rigid path. The machine mastered the art of panic. It understood the mechanics of terror. It predicted the rhythm of the mob. The scientists felt like ancient gods. They could see the future coming. But they were trapped in the past. The code was written in blood. The ghost was a lonely, cold entity. It lived inside the vacuum tubes. It watched the world with logic. It waited for the next spark. The ghost was ready to speak. Chapter 5: The Geography of Rage. Geography was the model's primary focus. Location determined the level of danger. Narrow streets meant trapped police forces. Open plazas allowed for massive gatherings. The DARPA model mapped every alleyway. It identified high-risk zones for intervention. Could a city be built to fail? Or could it be built to control? The model suggested physical barriers worked. It recommended changing the urban landscape. Architecture became a tool for pacification. The city was now a laboratory mouse. The walls were watching the residents. They studied the slope of the hills. They measured the width of the roads. Every exit was a tactical weakness. The machine suggested destroying certain blocks. Urban renewal was often just military planning. They cleared paths for armored vehicles. They removed cover for the snipers. The geography of rage was a map. It showed the path of least resistance. The logic of war shaped the suburbs. Highways were built to divide people. Bridges were built to be closed. The environment was a silent weapon. The simulation showed where to strike. It showed where to build walls. It showed where to place cameras. The city was no longer for living. The city was a managed container. The residents were just moving parts. They lived in a pre-designed trap. The geography was a physical cage. The machine drew the lines daily. The rage was mapped and contained. The map was the new reality. The territory was lost forever. Logic replaced the soul of architecture. The city was a digital fortress. Every brick was a data point. The skyline was a military graph. No street was left to chance. The simulation owned the very ground. Chapter 6: The Psychology of the Crowd. What makes a person throw a stone? DARPA tried to quantify human emotion. They measured relative deprivation in communities. This is the feeling of being cheated. The model calculated the frustration index. When frustration hit 10, riots began. The machine predicted collective human behavior. It ignored the individual's unique story. It saw only the movement of masses. Like water flowing down a steep hill. The crowd was a single, angry organism. The computer tried to steer that beast. It analyzed the pulse of the mob. It looked for the leaders in shadows. Is anger a contagious biological virus? The simulation treated heat like hatred. It studied how eyes meet in crowds. It measured the volume of a scream. Can math capture a heart's breaking point? The programmers thought the answer was yes. They built algorithms for mass despair. They coded the sound of a riot. The machine simulated 1,000,000 angry voices. It practiced silencing them in digital space. Human dignity was an unknown variable here. The code only recognized the kinetic force. The soul was a missing data set. The crowd was just a thermal heat map. Panic followed a very predictable path. The machine calculated the speed of fear. It knew when the first glass broke. It knew which slogans caused more fire. The psychology of rage was now property. It belonged to the men with computers. They owned the map of your mind. They predicted your next heavy breath. The mob was a solved mathematical puzzle. The individual was a ghost in data. Chapter 7: The Failure of Logic. Can math truly predict a revolution? The 1968 model had a massive flaw. Human choice is not always logical. A single insult can spark a war. A random gesture can stop a fight. The DARPA model struggled with randomness. It could not account for the heart. Data cannot capture the smell of smoke. Or the sound of a mother crying. The simulations often missed the mark. The perfect model met the imperfect reality. Logic failed where passion took over. The machine predicted a riot on Tuesday. But the city stayed silent and cold. It missed the riot on a Sunday. Because a child had smiled that morning. The computer cannot factor in a smile. It cannot calculate the power of mercy. The scientists were baffled by human kindness. They called it an error in code. They called it a statistical outlier. But that outlier is our true nature. The machine saw us as steam engines. We are actually vast, deep oceans. The pressure does not always cause explosions. Sometimes the pressure creates a diamond. The model could not see the light. It only saw the shadows of movement. It tried to box the chaotic wind. The wind simply blew the box away. The failure was a beautiful human thing. The machine was too smart for life. It was too logical for the living. The data points began to lie. The humans were being unpredictable again. The simulation started to eat itself. Reality refused to follow the script. Chapter 8: The Ethics of Surveillance. This project raised a terrifying question. Is predicting a crime itself? DARPA was watching citizens without consent. They used census data for military modeling. The line between protection and control blurred. If the computer says you will riot, are you already guilty in their eyes? The project was shrouded in deep secrecy. Critics called it a digital panopticon. A prison built out of predictive algorithms. The ethics were discarded for national security. Privacy was the first casualty of 1968. Your address was a target for simulation. Your income was a risk factor level. The government was playing God with data. They built a vault of human secrets. Who has the right to see tomorrow? Who has the right to stop it? The scientists ignored the moral cost. They were chasing the ultimate control. They wanted to pre-arrest the future. They wanted to jail the potential riot. This is the birth of the Minority Report. This is the end of the secret. The state became an invisible, digital voyeur. It watched the bedroom and the street. It judged you before you even spoke. The machine became the judge and jury. Data was the only evidence they needed. The truth was buried under punch cards. The people were never told the truth. They were just dots on a screen. The ethics were a forgotten human relic. Power was the only active code. The algorithm was the new law. Chapter 9: The Legacy of Seed. The 1968 model eventually faded away. But the code never truly died. It evolved into modern predictive policing. Today's AI uses the same basic logic. Identify the zone, send the patrol. The DARPA project was the direct ancestor. It birthed the world of big data. Our phones now provide the punch cards. Every movement we make feeds the machine. The 1968 riots built our digital cage. The algorithm is still watching the streets. The past is never truly behind us. It lives in the cloud and servers. It tracks your likes and your hates. It knows your route to the office. It knows your favorite place to hide. The seed project was just the beginning. The tree has grown very tall now. Its roots are deep in our cities. Its leaves are the cameras above us. We live in a constant, live simulation. The 1968 experiment never really ended. It just became much more efficient. It became invisible and part of life. We accept the machine's quiet judgment now. We call it safety in modern progress. But the ghost of DARPA is laughing. It finally has all the data points. The city is finally fully transparent. The cage is made of light and code. The legacy is a world without secrets. The legacy is a predictable human race. The machine is finally satisfied and calm. The loop is closed in tight. Chapter 10: The Hidden Influence. Did the model actually stop riots? Records suggest the military used the data. Troop deployments mirrored the computer's maps. National Guard units moved into red zones. The model dictated the strategy of containment. It changed how cities were occupied. The machine was the silent general. It whispered to the men in power. Deploy here to save the status quo. The computer didn't solve the social problems. It only helped manage the violent symptoms. The root causes remained untouched and raw. The simulation favored the existing power structure. It was a tool for the status quo. The data was biased from the start. The machine protected the walls of power. It did not protect the people inside. Military commanders sat in front of screens. They watched the digital red dots grow. They moved their tanks like chess pieces. The algorithm decided which street was lost. It decided which neighborhood was a sacrifice. This was a new kind of warfare. A war fought with statistics and steel. The human cost was hidden in spreadsheets. The blood was just a red pixel. The screams were just a frequency spike. The machine was cold and very efficient. It turned the city into a battlefield. But the enemy was the city's own. The machine treated citizens like foreign invaders. It mapped the rebellion of the weary. It calculated the cost of every arrest. The influence was deep and very quiet. It shaped the urban response for decades. The silent general is still in command. The maps have only become more detailed. Chapter 11: Societal Impact and Fear. The public eventually learned of these models. Paranoia swept through the activist communities. The computer knows your next move. This fear changed how people organized. It created a chilling effect on protest. If the state can predict your anger, how can you ever surprise them? The simulation became a weapon of intimidation. It wasn't just about predicting the future. It was about controlling the present moment. The machine was a psychological wall, a barrier against the winds of change. People started to watch their own steps. They feared the invisible eye in code. Trust in the community began to erode. Is your neighbor a secret data point? Is your friend feeding the machine? The fear was more effective than police. Fear does not need to use a baton. Fear stays with you in your bed. The DARPA model created a mental prison. It made freedom feel like a calculation. It made rebellion feel like an error. Activists stopped meeting in the open air. They feared the heat maps of the military. The machine had already won the war. It conquered the mind before the street. Society became more rigid and very quiet. The silence was a victory for the seed. The computer fed on this new silence. It recorded the peace of the graveyard. The impact was a slow, digital death. The fear was the ultimate social glue. The machine kept everyone in their place. The simulation was a very successful lie. Chapter 12: Technology versus Humanity. We are still in this fight today. The battle between math and the soul. DARPA proved that crowds follow patterns. But individuals still hold the power. One person can break the entire simulation. The 1968 model was a cold mirror. It showed us a world without empathy. It showed a world run by equations. Are we more than just data points? The machine says no, we are predictable. Our history says we are brilliantly chaotic. The struggle for our autonomy continues. The algorithm wants to find your rhythm. It wants to guess your next heartbeat. But the soul has no fixed pattern. Humanity is the glitch in the system. We are the noise in the signal. Technology seeks to smooth the rough edges. Humanity thrives in the jagged and raw. They try to code our messy emotions. They try to digitize our collective dreams. But a dream cannot be a variable. A hope cannot be a binary digit. The 1968 model was a warning sign. It showed the limits of the machine. It showed the arrogance of the elite. They thought they could own the future. They thought they could buy the sun. But the sun still burns without permission. We are the fire that cannot be mapped. We are the variable they can't solve. The fight is for our very essence. Do we follow the path of code? Or do we walk our own way? The machine is waiting for your choice. The technology is ready to record it. The soul is ready to defy it. Chapter 13: The Final Lesson. History repeats itself in digital loops. The 1968 riots were a turning point. Technology and social control became one. We must look closely at the algorithms. Who writes the code for our cities? Whose order is the computer protecting? Synapse Daily reminds you to watch back. The eye in the sky is old. It was born in a summer of fire. Thank you for listening to this journey. Stay curious, stay human, and stay alert. The next simulation is already running.